Hi, I'm Paul Marcel. Last year at WIA 2011, John Economaki of Bridge City Toolworks invited a number of us Jointmaker Pro customers to come out and do demos and talk about the product. What do we like about it? What do we use it for? Anything special like that. And actually a group of 4 of us were there, and it was a lot of fun because all 4 of us actually use our Jointmaker Pros quite differently. Now, what we produced at the show as a demo were these After-Earthquake Detectors. So we had 4 Jointmaker Pros set up. One of them was set to do the cross cuts for the base. Some of them were set to do the squiggle wood, some for the claw on the top. And I'll go over all those parts here. It was an interesting way of doing it. That way there we could sort of batch it out as an assembly line so people could see all the stages of production without having to do any changes on the table itself. So when I got back from Cincinnati, I was surprised to find a lot of the spare stock of the After-Earthquake Detectors had made it in my luggage. I'm not sure why. So what I thought of doing is I'd like to do a podcast on that project that we did so you can see how it's made, because there are a lot of cuts and things that you do in this project actually that are very difficult to do on a table saw or cutting by hand or even doing with planes and chisels. I mean, of course, all of those tools, maybe not the table saw actually for the claw, all of those tools can accomplish this, but the degree of accuracy that you're going to get by doing it, say, by hand, or even if you're using some small jigs to hold blades, you're just not going to get anywhere close to the accuracy that you're going to get with this tool. So I'd like to go over showing you how we're going to make this, and also along the way I'm going to talk about different ways that you can use the Jointmaker Pro actually to replace certain steps in dimensioning stock. For example, the cuts on the side of this After-Earthquake Detector, they're so smooth that there's nothing left to do. It's a finished cut. So after you did the cross cut, you can pretty much just put some finish on there and you're done. What was interesting was when I was at Woodworking in America, I was doing the cross-cut station for a little while, and I would just cross-cut this ash, which, ash is not going to be the smoothest cut because it's such an open grain wood. But you just hand this to people and their eyes would just immediately pop because it is glass smooth and ready for finish. So what I find is that the Jointmaker Pro makes actually an exceptional piece for doing some of this dimensioning, because you're not going to have to take this now to a shooting board to clean up the edge. It's done. And to be honest, at least my shooting board and my shooting board skills, this is cleaner than what I get. So now that I've talked a lot about what we're going to do, let's talk about what this little thing is. So John came up with this idea. It can only come from John's mind. What it is he created a number of these bases that are already laser etched, with the name of the inventor of the After-Earthquake Detector, Cooter Ditchman. And it's a little product that if you go to lunch one day, you take off out of the house and you come back home and you find that the ball bearing is on the table, well, you obviously had an earthquake while you were gone, so you should go check the aquarium, make sure the fish are still in it. Now, the parts of the After-Earthquake Detector are pretty simple. You've got a base, you've got this little pole that's made with squiggle wood so that it's very flexible, so that it'll tip in the case of an earthquake. I calibrated mine to a magnitude 4 or higher. You've got a little claw on the top, and then this is just simply doweled in and just inserted into the base for convenience. So made it very easy for people to take home from WIA, since we were actually giving these away as part of a donation to the Mark Adams School of Woodworking. Now, some of the interesting things about making this, the squiggle wood is a staple of the Jointmaker Pro. Anybody that gets that's almost the first thing that they make, because it's kind of fun to play with. It's a lot of fun to play with. There's a lot of kinetic art out there that's made with these things, and it's kind of fun. And another thing actually that you can see, this was something I was only noticing even earlier today. Take some squiggle wood, now bend it. So now you've got a really nice curve here, almost gap-free, because these cuts are so clean, there's no rough edges on them. You could just, if you were gluing that up into something, you could keep that bent, glued down with these long grain to something else, and you could make something kind of nice. I'm thinking for kinetic art, that'd be a great place for one of these ball bearings to come flying around a corner. One of the other cuts that's very interesting is the claw. It's made on the top. What it is it's a set of 45-degree cuts, one in one direction, one in another direction to create the claw. But it's not done on the flats, and that'd be too easy. So what it was done is it's done on these corners. So from this corner, there's a 45-degree cut and another one coming in, and then it's rotated, one here and one here, to create the claw, which is a very unique looking claw. So that's what we're going to make today. We're going to do this predominantly with hand tools. I mean, I did use a table saw to rip a rough blank for this pole up here, but then we're going to go ahead and dimension it using a couple techniques that I've shown actually in my no comment video. You saw me thickness planing some small splines for that box using hand plane and some skids. I'll show you how that works and a couple different caveats of using that. So it's an excellent technique when dealing with small stuff like this, and a couple other tricks for dealing with small parts like this on your bench. Now also for some fun, we're going to want to make this base. Now I don't want to just use the bases that I took. I'm going to take some, I have actually some very nicely figured walnut that I'm going to use. And what we're going to do is we're going to plane a profile in the front of it using the HP6v2, and I'll show you some of the different plane blades that come with that and some of the possibilities of what you can do in the front. Since I don't have a laser etcher or anything like that to write these words in, I'm actually not going to use a profile like this where I can write. We're going to go ahead and use a stepped OG instead. Alright, well let's get to making our after-earthquake detector. So I've been doing a little bit of dimensioning here, planing some boards that we're going to be using for the stock, and also a couple sample boards like this one here that I'll show you in a moment. But all this stock more or less started as two-sided surface. They're all offcuts from some of my previous projects, so you know I wasn't going all gung-ho, all Neanderthal there. That's a whole different podcast, getting things parallel. Maybe I'll do that someday. Now for our base, this one here was made out of ash and it's got all the laser etching on it, so I dug out this really nice piece of walnut that I've already done some surface planing on to get it nice and cleaned up. It's pretty crotchy, so I'm not sure how this is going to go with the molding plane, but we're going to give it a try. And I also took a piece of beech here, and I used a table saw just to rip an oversized square-ish piece. That's going to be the stem. Now I say square-ish just because we need a piece that's very, very square to make this look good. So this is, you know, more rectangular, but it's oversized in both dimensions. So I'm going to be using that skid technique in order to thickness plane this in two directions to get it to the right size for us. Now I did use the HP6 mini multiplane to find a profile that we could use in place of this simple chamfer that they had on the front. I mean, here it's because they were laser etching, you know, After-Earthquake Detector by Cooter Ditchman and such. Mine's not going to have that. I'm going to put my name on it instead. With the mini multiplane, there are a number of different profiles that you can get. There's bases and irons that go together, as I've shown you in a previous video where I did the jewelry box inserts for the handmade jewelry box. So one of the ones I put on here just now is a stepped OG that you can see here. So I killed a little bit of the light so you can actually see it on this white maple. But it's got a great look to it. And what's interesting is that as you're doing the planing, you can stop a little bit early and you get a little bit of a different profile without the bottom step. It's just a nice easing onto the bottom. So that was done with the mini multiplane. Earlier this week I was playing around with it as well, and I ended up using the cornice blade. And what it does is it creates kind of a chamfer that's inside of a slot of two steps. Now I went a little crazy and just kept on going. Those steps are way too big, but it does show a little bit better on the camera for you. But you could see how something like this is very easy to write something in there. Or what's actually interesting about this is that this blade here can be used for wide inlays. And that's something that we're going to be talking about in a different podcast. Now, a friend of mine, Chris Wong, who you see listed on my blogs, he does Flair Woodworks. When he was out here visiting just recently, he decided to make what is apparently a traditional Canadian tool for use on the bench. And what it's called a brawl. Because what it is it's a bench clearing brawl. I can hear the collective groan. Now if you want to make one of these fancy things, he's actually going to have some instructions up a little later on this week. So you can make your own brawl as well. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to dimension this stick that we're going to be using. And there's a couple different things that are involved here. What I'd like to do is I'd like to use that sort of skid technique that I used in No Comment number 1. So what that technique is I'm going to take a plane and I'm going to be taping some skids on it that are going to act as a way for it to bottom out. So I have some skids here that I made. Now all I did is I just took a scrap of wood that I had off of the same board and I just planed it down until, you know, this was a single board before. And then I just cut it in half. So these are both the same height. And these are basically the same height as this piece, which was a stock piece I got from WIA. So all I'm going to use is some simple household double stick tape for this. Now you could use some of the other double stick tapes, like there is some turning tape, although some of those are a lot stronger. They're much stronger than you need. So now with this, we're just going to stick them onto the side of this plane. Now you could make some that are the full length of the plane, but you really don't need that. Just make sure it's on either side of the blade and it's not going to be in the way of the blade projection. If you have a blade that goes considerably closer to the edge of the plane, you can always cut these in half and then you put a half up here and a half back there. That'll work just fine for you. So now, as you can see, I can keep planing until I bottom out, and I'm going to be setting a thickness. When you're going to be doing this, these pieces don't need to be, absolutely dead square. You don't need to worry about that too much. If there's a small bevel, because like when I do hand planing, I almost always get a bevel. I can never get the 90 degree. So if there's a small bevel, it doesn't matter. It's the part that touches the bottom. If that's just an edge or if that's a flat because of whatever, then that's just fine, as long as both of them are the same. And with that said, if you wanted to actually put a certain known bevel on here, you could do that by having one of these thinner than the other one. Now normally you would not set these to being your target thickness, because if this is your target thickness, remember the blade has to project out. So it's going to be taking a little bit more, and also you're going to be planing one side of this. When you go to run this, you're going to be running it with the skids on either side of the wood, and you're just going to keep on going until you bottom out. So if the blade is projecting out below the base, it's automatically going to make it thinner than this. But also, if you end up bottoming out on this side here, when you go to rotate it to do the opposite side, you're not going to have any more depth to go. Now, if this side is already clean, then you're fine. Now, so when you flip this thing over, of course, you need to either push the blade out further for a bigger projection so that you can make up for the fact that you bottomed out and now you're flipping it over and you're still at the same height. But sometimes what that's going to do is it's going to introduce some chatter just because the blade is sticking out further. It all depends on your plane, it all depends on the stock, the angle, a bunch of little things like that. Phase of the moon. So a different technique that you can use for that is when you're doing the first side and then the second side before you actually go to make the parallel side, is you can take a piece of blue tape, you can put like 3 strips on each one of these skids, go ahead and use it on those first 2 sides, and then when you go to flip it over to the last 2 sides, peel it off. It turns out that for me, at least with the way when I was using this recently, each strip of tape was basically 1 pass. So if you're looking at it going, those machine marks are going to take 3 passes, put 4 strips just to make sure. So that's how I'm going to address this piece. Just like that, we can do it. Now, remember, try not to change the projection of the blade, because as soon as you do that, you kind of mess it all up. Depends on how accurate you need this to be an exactly sized square. So now we have a different problem, though. Let me put this up against my planing stop. And let me actually mention this planing stop. It's actually such a ridiculously simple idea, and I think I found it on the Popular Woodworking site, that I had to make one right away. All it is it's just a piece of scrap wood. Does your vise do that too? Mine does all the time. It's just a piece of scrap wood, a very thin board, and then 1 screw. So when I put this in here, all you got to do is push it up against, in my case I used 2 of the Festool clamping element dogs, but you could use any type of dog. Just push it up against that until it nicely squares that up, and then tighten up the vise. Now you got a great planing stop, works wonderfully. But the one time it doesn't work wonderfully is when you're trying to do this. When I put this board against here, and I go to run these skids on there. Well, what am I going to do? I'm going to bang the skids right into that planing stop. So we have to come up with a different way of doing that. So the easiest way for me to deal with this is I have a couple little holes in my bench for whenever I end up doing this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a drill, and I'm just going to drill a hole right through this board at the end. I have more stock than I need. And if not, just cut yourself a little bit longer, that's all. And go ahead and chamfer this hole a little bit so you can really countersink that screw so you don't run your plane on it. Then use a brass screw. You want to use a brass screw, so if you accidentally hit it with the plane, the screw is going to lose, not your plane. You'll have to sharpen it, but you got to do that anyway. Perfect. So now when I'm planing, this is going to hold it steady. I mean, sure, it can swing side to side, but it's not going to go anywhere. So as long as I'm pushing it with the plane, I'll be just fine. Now, I happen to have put this in the direction that I need for planing. But one thing that's nice about this, if you're doing this, try to place it somewhere in the middle of your bench. For one thing, it's probably the more convenient place anyway. But if for some reason you need to plane the other direction, just swing it around. And now you can do it from this side just fine. And this will act more as a stop. So now I finally bottomed out. Nothing's coming out of the plane except just some little dust every now and then when it happens to skim over something. I mean, it's nice and smooth. So now what we're going to do, we're going to rotate it 90 degrees while keeping the tape on. Now just run it again. So now with those two dimensions, and I had to rotate that around just because I was getting a little bit of chip out. So what I'm going to do now, peel off the blue tape, and we're going to do the next two sides. And that should complete our board. I never said this was fast. Now, as is normally the case with planing, normally if you're planing a board in a natural direction is this way, on the one side, when you flip it over to the opposite side, it's normally going to be this other way. So this one here, this side here, I had done this direction, so more than likely it's going to plane better this way. We'll take it kind of slow. Now, if you remember, the opposite of the next side that we did, we had to do it this backwards side, so we're going to be able to do it the opposite way. And here's another thing. If you're chamfering the screw hole as you go, it makes it really easy to remember what you've got left to do. And there you go, a nice square stick. And as this is between periods, we got to run our bench clearing bra. So our stick stock is done. Let's take a look at what we can do for the molding. So let me bring the camera in a little bit closer so you can see the planing, and then I'm going to go and do this profile. That's looking fantastic there. I can tell where I'm going to make my base. So now we're going to cross-cut this on the Jointmaker. So let's go over there. So back at the Jointmaker, you notice that I have this really high precision attachment. What I've done is I've attached a camera here so you can see, hello, hello. And this way here you're going to be able to see the blade position and some of the work that I'm going to be doing here a lot clearer while I'm able to still yak at you. So here at the Jointmaker, what we're going to want to do is, of course, cut our base out of this. Now we can just do two quick cross cuts, but I intentionally left this back while it's straight off the table saw. There's all sorts of little kerf marks all over here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to do both the cross cut and then I'm going to rotate 90 degrees and we're going to take something off the back because the finish on the cut here, it's done. It's a lot better than me sitting there monkeying around with my plane and wondering, am I going to get this still parallel? Oh, heck with it. Let's just cut it. So first I'm going to cross cut this piece here because that's a very basic case with the Jointmaker. Now one of the things that you're going to want to take care of, this is a bit of a review of what I covered when I did my little boxes for those jewelry boxes, is you're going to want to set the pitch of the saw according to what you're cutting. Now, the walnut isn't necessarily that hard, but we are going through a wider piece, certainly much wider than this little stick. So with that in mind, if you take a look from your side here, and actually you'll be able to see it on the camera here, the close-up cam, you can see that right now I'm almost taking half of this board in one pass. That's going to be a little bit much. I would actually rather take it in multiple passes. Multiple passes are easy. So I almost like to err on the side of being conservative more than trying to hog it all off in one time. So let me just lower the pitch control here, and actually we can take a look and see where we're at. Now these are the types of things that as you use a Jointmaker, you're just going to get more comfortable with. You're going to push it one time and it's just not going to move, and you're going to know, oh, I was trying to take off too much, and another time it feels like you're just pushing it way too many times for the type of cut that you're making. Yeah, for example, this rod here, this is a single cut. So what I'm going to do here is pick a nice pretty place. There's a lot of really nice crazy grain right in here that I'd like to take advantage of. So let me scoot this over to about here actually. Then it gets a little bit boring right there, so that'll be good right there. We're just going to scoot up the trap fences to lock it into place. One thing you're going to want to do with the Jointmaker, always use clamps. You're always going to want to use them as much as at all possible because the blade tends to want to lift the stock. So if you're just doing it by hand, it's very easy to push. It's going to lift it a little bit, and then it's going to torque as you pull back if you're not hanging on tight enough. And then when you torque it, you're going to bend a tooth. And then that requires at least 17 minutes of cussing out loud. All right, so let's go ahead and do our first crosscut. And there we go. And in the process with the flailing camera cable, I got a false positive here. So now what I'm going to do is put this on here with the base that John originally had, just to have a sort of an idea. But this again shows how the Jointmaker is very easy to do things visually. I can place this on here, and looking down from the top of the fence, I can clearly see the kerf line here. So I can just scoot this over until the kerf line is just on the outside of this block, and pretty much I'm set to go to make this an identical cut. I mean, it's even to the point where you can do repetitive cuts this way if you mark things on the fence, or maybe just run a little kerf line on it. Now, I'll admit, I'm in the middle of this really crazy walnut, and you can feel it sometimes grabbing. Now, initially, I'm going to have to cross-cut this just to get it to a certain size, and after that, we're going to put the claw in on the end of it. And then we're going to make the squiggle wood in that order, and I'll go through all those steps with you right now. Now, there's some really nice-looking curl here that I'd like to keep, and then on this side here, too. So let me just lop off this little bit that's on the end here. But one thing I want to do is, as I was talking to you before, the pitch control can actually be set to take, much more aggressive cuts. And on a small piece like this, we can take this out in one shot. So let me just advance the blade over here to the end so you can see. And now you should be able to see the pitch control going up and down. Now I'm going to go ahead and raise it up until a single pass is going to make a through cut on this little stick. There, that's going to be a through cut. One push. Very nice clean cut on that. Now for the approximate size of this little column, so I'll go ahead and use this size here because it actually is a fairly convenient size. So just to give myself an idea, a rough idea of how big this is, we can scoot this over, put the board on top. That'll be about it. Now with a board like this, you actually could just do it with hand pressure to give it the one push to the back, but we'll just do it with the clamp. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to create that little claw that's on the end. Now that's cut with a 45, so let me go ahead and cut this on a 45. So I'll pivot the keel up to the 45-degree position. Now I've already got a stop here that's set for 45, so we can just pivot that up till we're past it, flip the stop, let it drop into place. Normally what I do is I tighten the front one up, because if for some reason the back is just a little bit swung out, as soon as you tighten this one up, it pulls that one in. Now let me explain how this claw is going to get cut on the close-up camera. We're not going to be cutting it on the 45 this way with it being flat against the fence. Rather what we're going to do is we're going to be cutting it this way. So the 45 is going to come up through the side here until it comes up to the front. Now I'll extend the blade here, not actually cutting obviously, but this will give you a better perspective view through the camera of what it's going to try doing. So this is basically what we're trying to accomplish. It's going to make that cut, then we're going to rotate it, get another one on this side, do it on the other two sides, and then what you end up with is the claw. Now obviously I can't go trying to hold this in place. That's just not going to work. It's going to be moving all over the place. We need this thing firmly fixed. So earlier when I did the profile on the side for the base, what I did is I put the V-grooving plane iron in the HP6, and I cut a board, a little scrap of maple, and I put a V-groove in it. So I put the V-groove in, then I cross-cut it. Now what this piece is going to be for is that we're going to place one of these pieces here against the fence, and then we're going to place this square inside that V-groove. So that's going to hold it there. Now we're still not going to want to hang on to this with our hands, so what we're going to do is we're going to take this other piece, place it over top of it, and now we can clamp to the fence. And we can get a really rock solid hold of this piece while it goes through for the cut. Now we don't want to keep placing this over and over again, so what we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit of double stick tape on the back of it, and then we're going to find its correct position and go from there. So what I'm going to want to do, put a little square here to make sure that I get this piece square to the table. And also I'm going to want to put my piece that I'm going to be cutting in so that I can see. I want the blade to just enter on the inside of that corner. I don't want the corner to be absolutely really sharp. That wouldn't be nice anyway. So I want it just on the inside of that. But I need this board held square. Make sure we got that nicely burnished. And now I'm going to use, I typically keep a bunch of these little clamps hidden underneath so that way that I can get nice and dusty. Now what we're going to do, the board is already in place. I'm going to put the clamping block over top and then put this clamp to hold it into place. So now while I could increase the pitch on the blade so that I could take this out in one shot, I actually want to go a little bit slower on this first one to get it to just meet up with that corner edge. And then after that, I can use this piece here as a guide of what to set that pitch for so we can get these in one swipe. So let me go ahead and cut this a little slower. Alright, now I've got it right up to the corner. I have to admit the camera being in the way makes it a little bit awkward to try seeing that. So now before I remove this piece, I want to be able to set the pitch so we can get that in one shot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower the blade so that the front of it is below the stock. Right there. Now I'm going to slide this all the way up. Now I'm going to have to go on the other side over here so that I can see a little bit better. And basically I'm going to turn the pitch. I'll turn the pitch knob until the top of the blade just tops out where I was at. Right there. Now actually this brings up a good point. A friend of mine was talking to me about this and had some questions, and one of the things is, well, if the blade is pitched like this, how do you make a flat bottom cut? Now that's actually why the top of this blade, as you can see, once you hit that last tooth, this slopes down. So the idea is that when you push over the top, that last tooth rakes it to make it flat. It's going to make that one setting. Of course, when I'm just doing some cuts where I'm trying to go through a cross cut and I'm just going, in the middle, yes, I have a diagonal on my cut. But at least when I've done a cut all the way through, then I get a nice flat top. And that's what we're going to need for this. So let me go ahead and pull this back and we're going to go rotate this piece. So we're just going to keep rotating it around 90 degrees. There's some funky offcuts when we do that too. Oops, let me get this clamp back on there, right? There we go. And you start to get these type of goofy offcuts. And little diamonds. Just in time for Valentine's Day. Okay, good. Just want to make sure that that was correct. And there's our claw. So now that I blew out some of the dust in the claw here, you can see a little bit better with the angle, giving you a little bit of a look. I mean, that is pretty much clean. There's not much else to do. And this was, in a sense, this was my test piece. So had I wanted to actually make one just absolutely perfect, you could do this, maybe adjust the cut a little bit more, or you could even do the cuts individually where you're creeping up on it all the time, which is what you would have to do actually if you didn't have this exactly perfectly square. Now the dowel we're using to attach it is a 3/16 dowel, so I need to drill a hole dead center on this piece so that we can anchor it to the base. So I've got the DJ1 drilling jig. It's got kind of an interesting set of jaws here that you can see. There's some trap fences here, so we can put this in between the trap on the bias, and basically it auto centers for you and really holds it there really well. And I've got a 3/16 guide bushing in on the end, so we can just go ahead and drill that in. I probably went too far. Perfect for our hole. Now, the reason I wanted to do that drilling right now is because I want to go ahead and make the squiggle wood on here, and I don't really want a piece that's going to be all flimsy. So now with the squiggle wood, if you want to look at one of our models here up close, you can see that basically all it is a curve cut that goes most of the way through, and then we just alternate it side to side. So while you see a zigzag on this side here is pretty boring, just the straight cuts, and the straight cuts on the opposite side. So spacing wise, it looks like we've got, I don't know, a little over a 1/16 of an inch, maybe a heavy 1/16 over there. So what I'll do is I'm going to start fairly low, and you can see also that the zigzag kind of hides any of the grain, and this was on one of the nicer sides. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the zigzag here on this kind of boring part. So we need to set the height of the blade. We're just going to go ahead and advance this because we're going to be able to do this all in one pass. Now this would completely cut it clean. We want to just lower this until we see that, yes, when we get all the way through, we're going to be leaving about the right amount here at the end of the cut. So I'm going to go ahead and start around here so that we can avoid where the dowel is going to be located. Now, normally, yeah, you want to do all these with clamps for doing the squiggle wood. You just get kind of used to really pinching down hard with your hands when you're doing it. And you're just going to go for the one push. And hang on when you pull it back. That's when you're going to bind your blade. Now, this is a very visual tool, so what we're going to do is we're just going to flip this. Line up the kerf with a little pencil mark I made here. This little pencil mark is about the spacing that we had for the other squiggle wood. So we can put that there. Another cut. And repeat. Now the closer you put the kerfs, the more flexible it's going to be. And also, the further you make the curves, as in the less wood that you leave on the far side, also the more flexible it's going to be. So you can kind of adjust these things as you go along. And one thing that you can do if you're making kinetic art is use the V-grooving plane with the multi-plane with a V-grooving iron in it, so you can make this V-groove on the top of a board like this, and then you make squiggle wood with it so that it can flex. That way there you can put something like a marble on here. And as it rolls, the board will bend, and then you can dump it onto something else so you can make this art that flows. It's very popular and it's very fun to see. And there we go, some squiggle wood. Nice and squiggly. This one here might be calibrated for a Richter too. Alright, so let's go ahead and assemble this. We've got the little dowel going into the base. And we can just turn the squiggle wood onto the top, give it a good rotation. I kind of like leaving it on the bias like this. So you can see what we've got going here. We got to put the little detector on the top so we know. There you go. Let's test it. Oh, it works! Kind of a false positive though. Now I'm not going to say that my After-Earthquake Detector is going to hold a candle to John Economaki's After-Earthquake Detector, but overall I think it was a really fun project. We got to do some work with some hand planes for both, planing it flat, but also to do work with setting up profiles like this, and you got to see a couple different profiles, including the ones that were used for the jig for clamping the block in place. And we got to play around a lot with the Jointmaker Pro, which this actually highlights quite a few cuts that it can do that are very special, I think. Now again, when I say that these cuts are basically, to me, better than even a shooting board cut, I mean, we can give this a quick wipe on the end grain here. Actually, we'll go ahead and do the whole profile, so you can have a chance to see what it looks like with some color on it. And you can see just how clean that profile is. I mean, that's smooth as anything. And even that in the front. Now, the front, this was a very kind of crotchy, very figured piece of walnut that I used. And, planing a profile like that, you don't really get a chance to close the mouth up as tight as you normally can. It's got to be up to the plane to be able to do a good job. And frankly, I was very impressed at how well it did that on that particularly gnarly piece of wood. Now the squiggle wood, staple of the Jointmaker Pro, the clean cut on the top, it's just perfect. So I'm going to place this on my desk to make sure that tomorrow when I go to lunch and come back, we did not have an earthquake. So I wanted to add one little story from WIA just for some fun. I made these jerseys when I went to WIA. I figured, John is footing the bill for this whole big trip, so I might as well just toss something in just to have a little bit of fun. And I wanted to wear a hockey jersey when I was doing the demos. So I snagged the Bridge City logo and went ahead and did all this and made him a jersey as well, since the two of us have bantered back and forth on his blog and comments because he plays hockey as well. So I'm walking with Lori, one of the other presenters, looking through the marketplace when I run across Tommy McDonald. Now he's talking and answering some questions to somebody, and he sees me, and then he's like, "Hey, what's up with Pittsburgh?" And he shouts this across the marketplace because these are the older Pittsburgh colors. So I guess it took a second to figure out that that's what I was wearing. So I turned around, no, not Pittsburgh, Portland. And what was funny is he's like, "Oh, okay." And then he kept talking as if Portland ever had a team.